Well, welcome everyone. We're glad that you could join us to talk about and have this conversation around flexible learning experiences that we've been seeing over the past couple semesters now. So I would like to introduce our panelists to you, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to facilitate some Q&A. We do have some questions already that have come through. We'll go through those, and then we'll address anything that comes up in the chat as we do that. So Ryan McCabe is the Associate Vice President of Academic Technology and High Impact Practices at Finger Lakes Community College. Ryan is joined today by Andrea McArgle, Director of Instructional Design Services at Binghamton University, where she helped facilitate the Bing Flex model, which afforded students flexibility and choice of course format. We also have Eric Berg, an instructor in the ESOL Transitional Studies Department at Monroe Community College. Eric taught his first HighFlex course this spring, I'm told, and also uses OER courseware for basic math and pre-algebra courses. Also, Amber Gillespie, Associate Professor of Psychology at Tompkins Cortland Community College. Amber is also a strong proponent of OER and one of our early adopters and champions. And we're also joined by Melissa Pincus, who is a business management major at Stony Brook University with a specialization in marketing. And as a student at Stony Brook, Melissa has taken flexible format courses in a couple different modalities. She's also an intern at Lumen Learning, so we're happy to have the student perspective as well. Turn that over to you now, Ryan. Thanks, and we can advance the slide.
Awesome, thank you. Did you say I can advance the slides?
Oh, Jamie can.
Oh, okay, awesome. Jamie, can you just go to the next slide? Thank you. So I'm really excited to be here today. And I think we have an awesome panel. We have such a good, such a wide range of folks. We have administrators, we have instructional support staff, we have faculty, and we have students. So really briefly, I'm just going to get into a bit of an overview about some of these flexible learning options that we have. And then we'll get right into the questions so we can hear from the folks who have done this and the folks who have experience supporting this and the students who have participated in it. So when we talk about hybrid education, we're really talking about a course where some of the work takes place in an online format and some of the work takes place in a face-to-face format. Really, this can be different, completely different, and a different percentage of the course can occur in the various modalities based on the content of the course. Really, it can be anywhere from 1% to 99%. So 1% could be online and 99% could be face-to-face. That's generally not where it ends up. Normally it's somewhere around 50-50. But really, when you're thinking about doing a hybrid course, you should take a look at the learning outcomes for your course overall and learning outcomes for your lessons or your modules, and think about what makes sense to occur in each space. What kind of work do you want to accomplish face-to-face? What kind of work do you want to accomplish online? And frequently now we're seeing faculty who looked more to the flipped classroom model when they're looking at hybrid education. When we talk about HighFlex, we're talking about a combination of online and face-to-face instruction that is simultaneous in one course section. The mode of instruction is determined by the individual student at each class meeting. So basically, a student can show up in person on Monday to the class at 8 a.m. Wednesday, they could watch online at 8 a.m. And on Friday, they may not be available at 8 a.m. Maybe they have to work or they have a doctor's appointment or something else is happening. On Friday, they could go in and watch the recording of that session. What's most important when you're talking about HighFlex is that students have the choice. So really, students are choosing on a day-to-day basis how they would like to attend your course, and whether, whatever method works for them. What we find is that around 20% generally attend face-to-face and continue to attend face-to-face throughout the semester. Normally at the first class meeting, you'll find that the numbers are a little higher, and then they generally will dwindle based on the data that is available. The really great thing about this, specifically related to COVID and everything we're dealing with, is that this does give students that ability to participate in a real-time course with other students, but they don't need to be on campus. And if they have medical concerns or vaccination concerns or anything like that, this allows them to still be connected with their fellow students in a real-time environment without any of the health concerns that go along with it. And finally, BlendFlex. This is a tough one because BlendFlex is a term that gets thrown around in a lot of different ways. Some people mix HyFlex and BlendFlex, as in that they are the same thing. And so depending on where you look online, you'll find some people saying BlendFlex and HyFlex are analogous, but they're not. Basically, if you look at, I think the best definition of this is if you look at UCF, what they're doing is they have basically a group of students who comes on Monday, a group of students who comes on Wednesday, a group of students who comes on Friday, and that is the group of students that attends that day of class every week moving forward. On the other days, they're expected to connect in the online space. And this seems very close to what, at least in my area, what happened with our K-12 audiences during COVID. So, some days you're connecting face-to-face, some days you're connecting online. It's not really a choice, which is why it's not HyFlex. You are assigned to whichever days you're going to be there. But again, this term gets kind of thrown around in a few different ways. So when someone's talking about BlendFlex, I think it's really important to understand what they actually mean, because they may mean HyFlex and they may mean something completely different. So let's go ahead and move forward, Jamie. So we'll get started with, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat so far. I don't know, Erin, are you seeing any questions in the chat?
No,
okay.
Not yet.
I thought maybe I was just missing something. So let's get started, and our panelists are welcome to jump in whenever they feel comfortable. But let's start with, what has your experience been with flexible learning formats? What have you done, and what successes have you found in these environments?
I'll start. This is Andrea from Binghamton. Binghamton, we did not do HyFlex over the course of COVID, in that our students were not given a choice on a day-to-day basis. So our students made the choice at the beginning of the semester if they were going to be online students, and by online students, I mean synchronous online students, or if they were going to be face-to-face students. In our flexible learning format, we did not have online asynchronous as an option. So it was just synchronous online or face-to-face. And prior to COVID, we've had hybrid classes. I wouldn't say a lot, but just like Ryan had said, that what was in person and what was online was dictated by the learning objectives of that specific lesson. But I would say about 50% of our classes during the pandemic were in that BingFlex format. That's what we called our flexible learning.
At MCC, I think it came up in my introduction, I did teach a HyFlex class, and that was really in response to teaching in the pandemic. There was a pilot group, I think there was some funding available in a pilot group, and there was a call for volunteers who wanted to try out this HyFlex format. And I had always had an interest in it. I teach developmental education courses, and often what I found in my traditional classes is that the students with their competing demands would typically, well, not typically, but often have poor attendance, and the poor attendance led to low success. So in working with colleagues, we were trying to find options for participation with those students. So when the opportunity for HyFlex came about, I really jumped on the opportunity. And I think even post-COVID, I mean, crossing fingers, post-COVID happens, I think I will still continue to offer HyFlex just because of the opportunities it gave to my students.
Yeah, and so prior to COVID, I did take several hybrid classes, once or twice a week on campus, and then once a week online as well. I did take synchronous and asynchronous classes throughout COVID. So I've kind of been a little bit of everywhere when it comes to HyFlex and hybrid classes.
Hi, I'll go next. My name is Amber Gillespie. I'm from Tompkins Cortland Community College. And similar to Eric, when we were given the option at our school to participate in high flex, which I guess at our school would be, learning how to, while you're in the classroom, project to any students that were coming in from anywhere, and also run the class face to face. I volunteered to learn how to use the equipment. And we really had a limited number of classrooms that we could do that in, and that we had enough equipment for. So I volunteered to do that. And I'm looking right now, we have at TC3 like 7 different options of classes that students could take, which sometimes is a little confusing for students as well as faculty. It wasn't quite the same as I think what Andre had shared at Binghamton, where it's like, okay, you do this or that, and there's no in between. I'm looking right now, the options we have are online flex, online asynchronous, live online and online asynchronous blend, live online meetings, on campus and online asynchronous blend, on campus and live online meetings blend, or on campus meetings. So those are the options students had. And I've taught in most of these options for my students in the past year, depending on the class, which can make it really interesting, but also a little mind-boggling. Because even if you have the same class, if it's online flex versus online asynchronous, or a live online and online asynchronous blend, even if it's intro to psych, you have to kind of model things a little bit different depending on the modality. So in some ways, it feels like you're teaching a little bit of a different class, because you have to set different parameters depending on the type of engagement that's being used in that class.
Yeah, I think, Amber, you hit on a really important point that I was going to touch on from a coordination standpoint. It is super, super important as we create and teach in all of these different modalities that we are able to explain it to students when they sign up in the simplest way possible. And this is becoming harder and harder. I mean, as you heard in the overview, blend flex is something different depending on where you are, it seems. And so explaining this stuff to students, in multiple places, in multiple formats, is incredibly important. So when they sign up, they know exactly what they're signing up for. Let's jump to the next question. How has high flex or flexible learning increased access, flexibility, or reduced costs?
I could start with the access. I think I mentioned it, but it just provided more opportunities for students to engage with the content. I really had to shift my thinking from recognizing attendance to recognizing participation. So I really kind of stopped using the term attendance, like, oh, your attendance is poor or your attendance grade. It was all about participation, because students were able to participate even if they weren't in class that day. With the flexibility, as Ryan mentioned, I did teach in the high flex format. So students had the option every day of class to come to campus, to Zoom in to the class that was happening live, or to participate asynchronously. And I used the flip model. So the course was really designed to accommodate that flexibility. And then as far as reduced cost, I do use OER materials like Lumen Learning platform for homework and tests. So that obviously reduced costs, but also just keeping in mind some of the demands that students have. Transportation costs were reduced, childcare costs were reduced if these were parent learners. And it was also conducive to working adults who had to maintain maybe a full-time job. They had some flexibility with their work schedule and their class schedule. So I'd say all of those things contributed to reducing costs for students.
Hi, my name is Renee Lathrop, and Ryan, I just wanted to hit on something that you brought up and also bring in the thing about access and everything. What I found, I was doing some asynchronous and synchronous online classes, is that some of the students, if they are focused on their engagement, as Eric was bringing up, they were very good in the online environment. At a community college, we get some students who don't know how to engage in their learning, and they think that just coming to class or and they had a lot of difficulty. And so trying to communicate that to students about what is expected of them of these different platforms, and then trying to make those as clear as possible, I think is one of the biggest hurdles that we're facing as faculty and also as administrators, trying to show students all these options is, what exactly do they as a student need to do or need to look forward to in their learning? And the thing that I've always been tripping upon with this high flex model is that to me, it puts too much option with some of the students that aren't able to make those decisions. They're not making good decisions because they never had to make them before. They never had to engage in the decision-making process. And so if people could talk a little bit more about sort of like how they help students pick which model works best for them and also some of the drawbacks, I would be interested in that.
So at FLCC, what we've, you're completely right. There's a lot of data out there related to upper level students or graduate students and high flex and their success levels. There isn't as much data out there related to undergraduate students or community college students in lower level courses related to high flex. And there is some concern that students may not always make the best choice, which is most certainly true. The pushback that I would have is that students sometimes are also choosing an online course, which may not be in their best interests. And I think that we make, when we assume that a student's making a decision, we assume sometimes that maybe they're not making it with all of the best information. But I would say on the flip side of that, we also don't have all of the information. There are a variety of reasons that students choose a certain modality. There could be all kinds of home concerns, food insecurity, transportation, a large list, specifically at community colleges, of reasons that a student chooses something, even if it's not the best fit for them. Is getting an education a better fit than not getting one? And so I think there's a variety of perspectives and angles to take when you think about this conversation. But I do think it's most important that we do our best to help them. And what we do at FLCC is if we find a student who's really, really struggling and they're only attending online, we try to reach out to that student and see if they can come in face-to-face, if they can meet with the faculty. If they're only watching recordings, can they connect synchronously? I think that there's a lot of options there to try to assist students if we feel like they're in the process of not meeting the expectations for the course. But helping them up front is a little more difficult because we don't always understand all the nuance in every student's life.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what Ryan said, sometimes what students think they want or what they think they can handle or what they think fits with, whatever their style of learning in does not always happen once reality hits. I know at our school, we had a survey that we gave to students that the administrators gave to try to see, well, what do students really want? What are they going to sign up for next semester? And of those who took it and they said, oh, we want more in-person classes. Say, okay, we offer more in-person classes. And then those are the ones with the lowest enrollment, or students that sign up for the in-person classes that have that high flex option where they can come online. Most of them end up coming online anyway, even though they did say they wanted to be in the classroom. And again, work schedules, childcare schedules, health issues, inclement weather, depending on where they live, all sorts of things happen, what the reality is versus what the ideal is. So yeah, it's like a moving target, to be honest with you. And even though I do this, I have a love-hate relationship with all of the options. I know I complain in my faculty meetings that we actually have too many options for the students, even though it's explained when they sign up what it is. They're still very confused. I have students that will email me in the beginning of an online asynchronous course, like, well, when are we having our video meetings? It's like, no, you signed up for an online asynchronous. There are no video meetings. So even though it is spelled out and it is explained to them, and now I particularly in my online asynchronous classes, in the beginning of the semester, I'm trying to send out in my intro email that, this is only online asynchronous. There's no video meetings. If you want to talk with me during office hours for video, fine, but they're really confused about what modality it is. Even when they sign up for it and it's explained to them, it doesn't always happen like you think it's going to happen.
One more comment about the student choice. I agree and acknowledge that students often don't make the best choices, most informed choices for themselves. And I did have some students who very consistently participated asynchronously throughout the entire course and did very well. I had some students who came in person very consistently and did very well, but I did have a handful of students who really took advantage of the HighFlex format. Using the flipped model, their homework was to watch a pre-recorded lecture video. So the night before class, students were intended to watch a pre-recorded video, and then students would often make choices based on the content of that lesson. If they were able to grasp that video lecture and complete the assignment on their own, they did that. If they had some trouble or some questions, they would come to the Zoom class or come to the in-person class for a little bit more practice and a little bit more support from their classmates and from the instructor. So I can't say that was the majority of students who really took advantage of that, but we're planning on getting like a testimonial from those students just to really explain in student-friendly language how to take advantage of that format. And one thing that we're considering for next semester is to put a little bit of constraint on the flexibility. So for example, for a student to participate asynchronously, they have to meet certain benchmarks and maintain a certain standing. Otherwise, that asynchronous option wouldn't be made available to them. That would add another layer of management into a course that's already pretty challenging to manage, but we are going to give it a try to see if that increases student success even more.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. What have been some of the benefits of the flexible learning environments for students, but also for instructors?
I could start this one. So definitely, I think a huge benefit is having that flexibility to actually like be able to have a part-time job. Or I have a lot of older friends in Stony Brook who have children and are able to kind of schedule themselves around that. So I think that is definitely a huge benefit. Or even with just, as we were discussing before, transportation and different kind of like socioeconomic problems going on. It's definitely definitely very useful for students that need that flexibility and accessibility when going to school.
I find the flexibility, well, from an instructor, and I think for the students too, there are, for better or worse, there's no snow days anymore, okay? So when there's a bad weather day, we can still have class. And I know I took advantage of that on days where maybe the school wasn't officially closed or there's really bad thunderstorms and the school's not going to close for that. And I would only have one student that would be driving into class anyway, and all the other students were coming online. I'm like, you know what? Today, the one student that's driving an hour and a half from Rochester, just you stay home, we'll all stay home and we'll have class online. So no one has to go out in this terrible weather. So it's definitely made it, flexible in a variety of ways, I think, for all of us. And I don't think post-pandemic, whatever you want to call it, that people are going to want the same options as they had before, where it's either in person or online and that's it. People want the flexibility, I think, of online meetings. There's no reason now for all meetings to be in-person gatherings with many people, when there could be a greater reach when we have meetings like this.
Just one quick comment on snow days. That was sort of a debate at MCC on whether snow days still existed amidst like remote learning. And ultimately the decision was made that snow days did still exist for equity reasons, because some students did have to travel to find internet access. And just to not, negatively affect those students, we had a couple snow days, which was a pleasant surprise for everybody.
I would say that
just
sorry, Amber. I would say that one of the things that that are benefits, not so much for the students, but or the instructors, but for the institution as a whole. Binghamton, we never have enough spaces for classes. So having hybrid classes lets you use the same classroom for double the number of classes. And because we are always like, there's nowhere to teach on campus and they don't want to build more classroom spaces. So being able to have hybrid classes allows the use of that same space twice as much, which is what happened a lot with the pandemic. It was very helpful since we couldn't use most of the classrooms because of their size.
All right. So let's jump forward to the next question. And for the panelists, if everyone is following along, hopefully with the chat, if you can jump in and answer some of those questions, if you feel like you can, that would be awesome. Thank you. So what have been some of the drawbacks of the flexible learning environment for instructors and students? And I'll go first, I guess. Let's mix it up. For instructors, I think what I hear most is, so you want me to teach 3 classes all at the same time? And my answer is never a good one, because I mean, the answer is kind of, I do want you to, the hope is that you will stand there and lecture or do whatever it is you do in your classroom space. That we will record that lecture and provide it in a place online. And also that you will manage the asynchronous online portions of the course. So it is a lot of work. And there is kind of a continual conversation through the university as a whole of what does this look like? What does this mean for faculty load? What does this mean? What other implications are there for teaching in this way? And so I think that one of the drawbacks, has been that concern from faculty, and a valid concern, that we're asking them to kind of do 2 things at the same time. And maybe even 3 things if they're also jumping into their recordings and editing and doing that kind of stuff. And so I think that is a bit of a drawback. And I think for students, what we've kind of already covered is really sometimes students think they're really ready to participate in a fully online course, and they may not be, right? We know that generally, men between the ages of 18 and 22 are not the best time managers. And so in that kind of fully online space that HighFlex can offer, they can really struggle in this environment. It doesn't mean that it's across the board, but it means statistically, they tend to do a little bit worse when given that kind of free reign. So from FLCC's perspective, those are some of the drawbacks that we've seen. What do the other panelists think?
I would say that one of the drawbacks, and it's you sort of alluded to it in your response, is that at Binghamton, we try to make sure that there's a lot of active learning in classes. And when I work with faculty, we want it to be active learning, limited lecture, so that the students are doing in class, not just absorbing or listening. And unfortunately, and doesn't have to be the case, but because if there have students that are online and students that are in class, and then if there was an asynchronous portion, they sort of default to this lecturing state because they're not familiar with any other ways to teach a class or have the online students engage with the face-to-face students. They're not informed about how to do that. So it's just lecturing. Or if they are doing active learning and there's an asynchronous portion, the asynchronous students are just watching the other students working instead of doing anything meaningful, which is obviously not good course design. And so I don't think that these are, have to be part of the model, but unfortunately, because of how things were spun up so quickly, it's hard to really change how you're doing things in that space. And then this sort of goes into the next question of what resources would they need. Some of the resources that we didn't have that we tried to implement, especially with audio, is like if you were going to have active learning and have discussions, it's basically everybody in the classroom's on Zoom with everybody that's online is on Zoom. So then why are they even in the classroom in the first place? Because the classroom space is not conducive to having sort of an active classroom, because they weren't built that way to begin with. Now, again, that's solvable with building that way to begin with, but where we are right now, we're not there yet. That's really been one of the drawbacks that obviously can be surmounted, or they're not insurmountable, but where we are right now.
Yeah, I would say, like Eric, I tried to do some with mixed success, some kind of flipped classroom type of exercises where I'd ask students, hey, watch this video before class, be prepared to discuss it. 9 times out of 10 students would not watch the video beforehand. So it's like, okay, I need to either use some time to show part of this video in class or have alternate activities for students that didn't prepare. I find like I was juggling many different balls of ways to engage or prepare if students were not prepared. One of the options I had to teach this summer actually, which we called online flex, where students had the option of attending, and this is a class, there was no in-person component, no on campus, but students had the option of attending a live online 2-hour class 1 day a week, or if they didn't want to attend, they could watch the recording later, which means there was really no incentive necessarily for them attending the class since it wasn't required. And since I was trying to do more of this flip model and have more active discussion, if students didn't show up to class, I have nothing to record and nothing to share with the other students. Like I'm not going to talk to myself for 2 hours. I already have recorded PowerPoint lectures I did that I share with students for that anyway. So I had 2 or 3 classes this summer where students didn't show up at all. So guess what? I had nothing to share. So with classes like that, I'm forced to also create a fully online asynchronous component where students have discussion boards that they have to participate in for credit, since I can't require them to come to the optional class that's going to be recorded to watch later. So basically it's like I'm building 2 courses, it felt like, which I did not love. So yeah, that was definitely one of the challenges. Or the classes that did meet on campus where students could come in, well, we used Team, we weren't allowed to use Zoom, that came in through Teams. Students, 9 times out of 10, students wouldn't even show up to class. Maybe one would show up to class and the rest would be, in the computer. And I'm in the classroom on campus by myself, looking at the computer. And students can't see me as well because it's not my home computer and there's cameras all around. So it's just a little me in a big class. And it felt very isolating and very wasteful for me to drive all the way to campus to be in the computer when I could have just stayed home. Or if students did come to class, I have to wear my mask. Students are in front of me. Most students are in the computer. So then they have to listen to me talking through a muffled mask and they can't see my lips move. So those were some of the challenges for me.
Yeah, I would say the primary challenge in my circumstances were the tech barriers. Tech barriers both from the student perspective and from the instructor's perspective. The learning curve was pretty steep in the beginning. It took a couple weeks to really become familiar with that tech setup in the classroom with multiple cameras that had the ability to pan and like the preset controls where if a student was talking in the classroom, I would try to pan to the student and passing a microphone around amid COVID. But we did overcome some of those challenges in the first few weeks just with the support of our tech support staff. They were crucial, like absolutely crucial, the tech support that we had on campus. We wouldn't have been able to do it without them.
I definitely agree with all of you. I see, like, from the teacher's point of view, it's definitely a huge challenge. Just from a student's perspective, like what Ryan was saying at the very beginning, a lot of students I found were having trouble with like time management and actually taking that responsibility, especially with asynchronous courses. And it's a lot of coursework and people didn't really appreciate that and would wait till the very last minute to get their work done and then be very overwhelmed. And they really didn't take that opportunity to be part of the class and have that active learning, like not even watch the videos our teachers were giving lecturers. And like for someone like me, I would take that ability to rewatch my lectures over and over and actually be able to process the information. But I know a lot of my friends did not take that opportunity. And I feel like they definitely missed out a huge part because they just want to get the work done and they're not actually taking the time to process the information and learn it.
Yeah, Melissa, that's a really good point. And I think that, depending on the data that you look at, um, generally students who have the ability and take that initiative to rewatch a lecture to get through the sticky points, it's generally between a half grade or a full grade that students are more successful in the course. So a B turns into a B plus, or a B turns into an A, depending on the study. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because it's really, really important. So thank you. Let's move forward to the next question. How is the instructional design or course design approach different for a flexible learning format?
I could start here because I think I mentioned a couple times now that I use the flip model, and I've also mentioned that I did not grade attendance. I graded participation. So the way that my class was designed was that there was a lecture video that was posted in our Blackboard course, and then after watching the video, students then had the option to participate with that lesson. So students that were planning to come to class the next day, whether on campus or via Zoom, they would automatically earn a participation grade just by showing up and engaging with their classmates and discussing the lesson and carrying out activities related to the lesson and starting the homework assignment related to the lesson. So students who did not attend still had to participate, and they had to participate through written responses. So a concept check question was posed based on the content of the video. And that concept check was, I checked for understanding with the students who were in class or via Zoom, but then the students who were asynchronous would get a grade for their written response to that concept check. So that's kind of how I designed my course. And it seemed to lend pretty well for the HighFlex format.
So I would say in terms of instructional design, when I meet with faculty, there isn't a huge focus on technology. That's not the first thing I talk to faculty about. It's mostly about, their learning objectives, their assessments, backward design, their assignments. The focus isn't on like what piece of technology they're going to use to meet their course goals. And with a flexible learning, especially our Being Flex format, technology had to be brought up all the time. And not that we didn't talk about technology before, but it really wasn't the focus of like my work with faculty. And it seemed to take more of, well, how am I going to write on the tablet? Or how am I going to, do these things that normally I don't discuss with faculty.
I think for me, and again, I'm talking about, when you have the option where you're, interacting with students on video in some way, having to prepare for dead time and transitions. Also in the beginning of each class, creating that space for students could check in, see how people are doing, making sure people are there and we're all, together. I would put course reminders in the chat. I would have my PowerPoints and additional lecture videos available if we were unable to cover everything in the class, which most of the time was the case. That was available for students outside of class. Also, I'm glad that, Melissa, you brought up that you actually watched some of these recorded videos that your professor shared, because I know I had some disagreements with some of my other colleagues who didn't necessarily want to record classes. We weren't required to record our classes. It was encouraged, but we're not required. I recorded every single one of my classes because I know some students would want to go back and watch them again. I mean, yes, it's good for the students that weren't there, but a lot of times students that were there and wanted to go back and revisit a point or something, they could do that. Or sometimes one time a student said, oh, I don't remember you discussing this in class. I was able to go to the exact moment. I'm like, oh, actually at 1.5 minutes, I said this, and reshare that with her and tell her exactly where it was in the lecture. So I found it very helpful with students across the board. But I think, and again, I don't know if this really gets to the heart of the question, but I think just creating connections with students were really important. And one thing that I sent out I would send out in the beginning of the semester, an email to all of my students, is letting them know that I'm human first and professor second. And I got this quote from an article that I read that I'm going to share in the chat. It was an article written by Kathy Davidson from CUNY, May 11, 2020, talking about preparing for fall 2020, but it's still relevant now. And the article was the single most essential requirement for designing a fall online course. And again, the pull quote I took for this from this article that I've been trying to live my life by this past year and a half is adjust accordingly. We need to be human first, professor second. We need to design as humans for humans in a global crisis. So just remembering that, and yes, I have due dates, but being flexible. Before, I would say, oh, no late work, or I give penalties for late work. Now, no. I have due dates. If students need an extension, just contact me, and I never say no. But just being flexible and understanding what we're all going through right now.
Thanks, everyone. What resources, technological and pedagogical, would support faculty to teach effectively in this modality? I'll start off this one, and I'm going to focus mostly on technology. One thing that I think is really important is, we talk about a classroom space and building it out for high flex. I think it's really important that when you are adding technology to a space, that you consider and let the technological decisions be driven by the discipline of that course. I think it's incredibly important. How you teach a communications course is very different than how you may teach a math course. And so I think it's really important that we don't create cookie cutter type rooms that basically we expect all faculty to walk into and teach to the technology, right? We want to have the technology work with the discipline and with the instruction. So for example, in our math, for our math courses, they're going in this direction. We set up the room in a way that allows the faculty to have, a giant whiteboard that goes all the way across probably a 25-foot wall. And the camera will track them and keep track of everything that's happening on that whiteboard. That's not necessarily something that you need if you're teaching an English class. You might need a small area to have that kind of ability, but nothing to that extent. So I do think it's really important that we think about the disciplines when we design the technology, and that those are at the heart of why we make the decisions we make from a technological standpoint.
I do want to say that one of the resources that was very helpful for us during the pandemic and teaching in BingFlex is we had classroom technology assistants. So we had work study students that were in the classroom with the faculty member that sort of managed the technology, so that the faculty member could focus on teaching and didn't have to worry about, like, am I sharing the right screen? Can these people hear me? Is the chat being managed? So the technology assistant handled all that. And so the faculty member didn't have to worry about that. Now, I do realize that's a luxury that we were able to afford that, but it did help with easing that sort of transition. In the future, if we were to keep offering classes in this format, I would think that, just like was just said, that you would have specific classrooms for specific purposes, and that faculty members would choose to be in this format, not being forced to it. And then they would have training on that technology in the room, and then you wouldn't need the classroom technology assistant. But I do think that if moving forward, if Binghamton was to keep offering this type of format, that it should be a choice.
All right, we'll go on to the next one. So Melissa, if you're able to, I think I'd like you to start this one off, and that is, what do students need to be successful?
I think the biggest thing that students need is to have that accessibility to speak to their teachers. They need to be able to communicate with you guys about any kind of coursework or questions they have within a timely manner. You know, you don't want a student to email you and you not answer them within for like 24 hours a day, and then you're moving on to the next lesson and they kind of lost their opportunity. If you understand what I'm like saying, like, of course, you can't get to them always on time. It's just being able to at least have Zoom, like, sorry, I'm a little nervous. Definitely having just the opportunity to be able to speak to you guys on Zoom and having office hours and having that accessibility, because I know some teachers, for me, they didn't actually have office hours, and that definitely was deteriorating for myself because I want to be able to see you face to face and ask my questions instead of sending an email.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. And, you know, related to what you're saying about office hours, with some of the federal changes for asynchronous learning, I think it's going to be really important that faculty really consider, even if you're teaching in the asynchronous mode, of having synchronous office hours to meet that substantial interaction mandate that the feds have put out. So I think that we really need to consider how we do that, not only for asynchronous, not only for high flex, but even for face-to-face classes, because we know that our students have all kinds of things happening and going on, and maybe they just can't make it to campus on that day. And, you know, specifically for community college students, this is more of a concern, I think, than maybe the four-year students who are residential. But it's incredibly important that we offer that kind of flexibility and that ability to interact with our instructors, because that is really what students are looking for, I think. And Melissa, you really highlighted that very well. Does anyone else have any comments about what students need? Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say primarily tech support. That was the biggest barrier that we saw. So the ability to connect with a human being, like if it was through the phone or through Zoom drop-in hours. But it became really frustrating when you have to kind of give the student a runaround to call a number and leave a message and wait for a call back. So good tech support, I think, is number one, but then also structure. I know there's been a lot of comments about deadlines and due dates in the chat. And I think that the due dates are important. I use soft deadlines, like I think, Ryan, you mentioned. I had a first deadline and then a final deadline. So the final deadline would always be a day or two before the next due date. So it wasn't possible for students to be behind. They sort of would eventually lose their opportunity to complete an assignment if another assignment was then due. So I think students do need that structure, because it would be easy for them to start floundering without some level of structure and accountability.
Thanks, Eric. And just looking at the chat, I think it's important to, we've had some responses around, you know, students don't attend office hours and all of those things. And that is completely true. When I walk around our campus and faculty office doors are open, they're 90% of the time are not students in those offices, even when office hours are happening. What I think is really important to remember, and this is relatively true nationally from what I've seen, but at FLCC specifically, the highest amount of logins into our LMS are between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. So that is when our students are choosing to work, and that is what works for them. And so thinking about different ways that you can have not flexibility at midnight and have office hours at midnight, but different ways you can connect with your students, you know, in ways that maybe give them the ability to have conversations with you. People are talking about text messages and Google phone numbers and Google Voice and all of that. So I think really thinking about all of those things is really important as we move to this. I think we're all looking to move and shift to an era of more flexibility. This is not just students, this is a workforce as well. So I think it's just really important that we really think about all the different ways that we can do that to support our students. Any other comments about what students need to do to be successful, Amber or Andrea, or should we move on?
I'm not in a student-facing office. I mostly help with faculty, but I'm always a big proponent of due dates. I know that the flexibility and the soft deadlines, and I understand that and I get that, but having worked with humans my entire life, people wait till the last minute to do stuff. And so if you don't give them a due date, they're never going to do it. So despite, there could be mountains of evidence from my own personal experiences, I'll always have due dates.
And just to piggyback on what Melissa said, you know, communication with professors, which I know is super appreciative when students just kind of fall off the face of the earth and I don't know what's happening with them. I can't help them. But if they check in, even if things are going terrible and they can't get their work in, but they communicate with me what's going on, communication with your professors is huge. On top of things maybe we have less control over that I wish SUNY would provide, or there's some way, you know, obviously to be successful, especially right now, as students need a just like transportation for some things, people need a reliable computer. They need good internet access, which again, you know, depending on where people live, you know, they might not have a whole lot they can do about that. But to be, you know, successful and to be on top of those deadlines, you know, I definitely give due dates for everything. But I tell students if they need an extension on something, just to communicate with me. And most of the time, students get the work in when they need to, but if they do communicate with me, I always give them the extension.
I would just say, I know I've kind of harped on this a couple times already, but campuses really need the tech infrastructure. The high flex technology is expensive and you need support for it. So like a high quality microphone and quality speakers and good cameras. So I would say that's primary for the anticipated needs.
Yeah, Eric, and that's a really good point. And from a cost perspective, when we're building out classrooms at FLCC, we're looking, you know, generally somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000 per room to build it out in a really nice way with microphones and cameras that follow the instructor and multiple large panels, so the faculty can see the students who are at a distance, and also obviously the content and so forth. So it is a significant investment. And I think earlier in the conversation, someone had asked the question around, what if I don't have support? And I really truly believe if you don't have support on your campus, it's not going to work. I really think you need support, and that support needs to come from basically the top of the institution, in the sense that you have to have the financial resources as well as the support resources in place to make that happen. So what are the anticipated future needs as we continue to explore flexible learning environments? All right, everyone's quiet, so I'll go first, and then hopefully you'll have some thoughts off of this. You'll be like, you know what, he's such an idiot, let's tear him down, and that's fine. So I think that we have, I think we can see this very clear evolution in instruction. So, you know, we have face-to-face instruction that goes back thousands of years, right? Lecture generally started as a thing because there was literally one book. So the person read from the book at the front of the room. It's obviously evolved a ton since then. We went to correspondence classes, and then we shifted to online, and then we shifted to hybrid, and then we shifted to even synchronous online. And now we're in this high flex. So when I try to think about what might come next, I'm not sure what the next step is past high flex, right? I can see the evolution up to this point, but after, like when we were doing synchronous, I was like, the next thing is going to be this kind of flexible environment. But now I'm not really sure what comes next, other than, you know, maybe faculty being able to have the technology that they need in their home environment to be able to teach in a way that gives them all of the same tools that they would have in the classroom. And some faculty, I think, have that, but that also still takes away that element of possible in-person instruction. So I'm not really sure where it goes from here, but does anyone have any thoughts or create? I love nothing more than crazy ideas. I want to hear about holograms and all kinds of cool stuff. So
I was just about to say, I sort of have a pessimistic view of maybe where the future could go in education. And that would be like artificial intelligence being the teacher, like an automated email system that there's really no need to interact with a live human being. Hopefully that won't happen in my lifetime, but it seems to be maybe going in that direction.
I think it'll definitely happen in your lifetime, because if you think about like how some of these larger online schools are, they have a lot of stuff that's being assessed through AI. You know, there's different AI that'll assess writing, and obviously it's not as good as a human right now, but I definitely think that it would be as good as a human in maybe not my lifetime, but maybe yours, Eric, because you look a little bit younger than I am. But what I think, I mean, the anticipated future needs, and I think we've said this a million times, is that like everybody needs to have the requisite technology, or it's just like inequitable. If an adjunct instructor is expected to purchase their own laptop that they use at home and pay for their own internet that they use at home, and you're trying to create this engaging, flexible learning environment, I think that you're doing a disservice to that instructor by not providing them with the technology they need to be successful. So if this is something that SUNY or our individual institutions really want to invest in, then we need to make sure that everybody has what they need, and that the institution, whether that be SUNY or our individual institutions, are financing that and not expecting that burden to come onto our faculty.
I'm really not sure, but I'm just hoping that our schools will give us at least a little more access to these kind of. Before COVID, I had taken maybe 2 or 3 hybrid classes, but they were really more in person than hybrid. It was more like just discussions in the hybrid part, like online. So I'm hoping that after this post-COVID situation, we've learned how to adapt so easily, and we've gotten so many new resources. So I'm seeing maybe in the next 5 years, maybe less than that, we'll just have even more options to do these kind of classes online and in person, and just see it kind of expand to 4-year colleges over just online schools.
Yeah, and I put some of my comments in the chat with some people agreeing that we should have universal internet, maybe issued laptops to faculty and students, or whoever, you know, needs this for their job. You know, it's just part of something everyone kind of like OER. I know Eric mentioned OER, and I've been using OER for like over a decade now. So to me, that's just like common sense and making, you know, the playing fields more equitable.
Thank you, everyone. So are there any final thoughts from the panelists? Any encouraging or discouraging words that you want to offer before we leave today? Or any, you know, why don't we do it this way? What's the one most important thing that you think this audience needs to leave with from this conversation today?
I would just say, despite the challenges, it was worth it, because I had a handful of students who would not have been successful in the course had they not had the different opportunities to engage.
I guess my parting thought would be that all of these different flexible environments could be very successful if they're done intentionally. And I know that the pandemic has made a lot of us are forced to do this, but not that it's over, but when it does become over and we have time to breathe and think, that if we can do this intentionally with intentional design of the spaces and the technology and the curriculum, that this could have amazing possibilities, but only if it's done well.
Yeah, I would say we're not going to go back 100% to where the way it was and what I would like to call the before times. You know, technology is here. It's here to stay, and in ways that we had not anticipated, but that we have to continually be mindful of and thinking about, and take the best of, of what we've learned from this experience.
I think just to remember that students learn in different ways, and there's always different forms and paths to success.
And I would just close with, make sure that, kind of go along with what Andrea said, intentional. Make sure this is intentional. Make sure you have support of your institution, and make sure that, your students are as well informed as possible about the modality that they're getting into before they sign up for it. And I think that is pretty much it. Erin, do I pass it back to you at this point?
Yeah, I think that definitely wraps us up in a great spot. This has been really engaging. I love the chat conversations too, and I do appreciate that from the attendees as well as the panelists. And so, Jamie, is that something that's being saved for these sessions, the chats?
Yes.
Maybe we could post it,
but
I was
yeah,
thinking we could post it with these slides or something. I mean, I'm happy to do that for you, but
yeah, I was going to say, if you want to do that, I'm more than
I
happy.
can do it because you're doing a lot. So let me do it for you.
Yeah, I'll send you the chat file.
And I just feel like that would really help to accompany the presentation. But thank you all. I really appreciate this. And Jamie, you can let us know what we're doing next.
Okay, great. Well, it's lunchtime next. So we're going to take a quick half-hour break and we'll meet back here at 12:45. I'm going to do my best to keep the otters up here, but if we can't, because I have to attend another meeting at lunch today, but I'll do my best to keep the otters up. If not, I'll see you all at 12:45. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our speakers today. Appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thanks, everyone.